Parshas ki Seitzei. This week's Parsha contains, among many other mitzvos, obligations, and prohibitions, it contains a prohibition against marrying into certain people. The Torah says in Pasuk Chav Gimel, Perek Chav Gimel Pasuk Daled, the Torah reads as follows: Lo yavo Ammoni uMoavi b'kal Hashem, neither an Ammonite nor a Moabite shall enter the congregation of the Lord. Gam dor asiri lo yavo lahem b'kal Hashem ad olam. Can't come even until the 10th generation. Why? Why this racial rejection, if you will? Al davar. So that's the next verse. This is Pasuk Hey, verse 5. Al davar shelo kidmu eschem balechem ubamayim baderech b'tzeischem mimitzrayim. On the matter that they did not come out to greet you with bread and water on the way as you exited, as you left Egypt. Vasher sachar alecha es bilam ben baor mipsor aram naharayim l'kalecha. And also because they hired a professional hitman. They hired Bilam, the son of Baor, from Psor Aram Naharayim to curse you. So Ammon and Moab have these legacies of mistreatment of the children of Israel. Okay, now we have a question. So the Torah says can't marry into them, and that doesn't mean that a Jew is not allowed to marry outside the faith. That we already know. But even if they are Megayer, even if they convert, you can't marry them. Parenthetically, the Gemara in Sanhedrin says that once Sancheriv came and mixed up all the peoples, then there is no longer a clear lineage, and therefore this prohibition, as a practical matter, doesn't apply. But in concept, it does, and before Sancheriv it did, and now we have a question. Why? Because in Pasuk Ches, that's verse 8, it says, Lo tisa'ev adomi kyochichu, do not reject, do not despise the Edomite because he is your brother. Lo tisa'ev mitzri, and don't despise or reject an Egyptian, ki ger hayisav artzo, because you were a stranger in his midst. Banim asher yavodu lahem, dor shlishi, third generation, children are born to him, third generation, yavo lahem b'kal Hashem. They are allowed to marry. So in other words, there's a distinction between the children of Ammon and Moab and the children of Edom and Mitzrayim. Ammon and Moab may never marry the children of Israel, even if they convert to the Jewish faith. And we know from the story of Rus that this applies to the males, not to the females. The females are permitted. David HaMelech, King David, came from Rus, and she was a Moabite, and nevertheless, Chazal ruled that the prohibition applies to males, not to females. But the question is, why is the prohibition so extensive on the children of Ammon and Moab, and yet with respect to Edom and Mitzrayim, it's not? Well, what was the issue with Edom and Mitzrayim? So Rashi says, even though you might think that it would be worthy to reject them, because Edom came to greet the children of Israel by the sword, and Mitzrayim actually tortured us and threw our sons into the sea to kill them, and did kill them. So what's going on here? Here we have, okay, they didn't offer you bread. Okay, Ammon. And Moab, okay, they hired somebody to curse us, and it didn't even work. The Torah says right here that Hashem didn't want his children to be cursed, so he turned it into a blessing. So what's going on? So Rashi comments, and he says that there's a distinction between somebody who tries to kill you physically and somebody who tries to kill you spiritually. Rashi says somebody who kills you physically only eliminates you from this world. Somebody who tries to kill you spiritually, in other words, tries to cause you to sin. And the background here is that both Ammon and Moab tried to cause the children of Israel to stray into idol worship. So that person who causes the sinner to lose his share in the world to come is even more reprehensible. The Ramban, although I don't believe he actually asked this question precisely, but the Torah doesn't say that Ammon and Moab are rejected because they caused us to sin. They're rejected because they didn't offer us bread, or because they engaged somebody to curse us. So the Ramban says that they're held to a higher standard. Why? They're held to a higher standard because it was Avram Avinu who saved Lot and enabled Ammon and Moab to be born. Lot, had it not been for Avram, would have died with everybody else when Sodom was destroyed. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu destroyed Sodom, Lot and his progeny would have been among them. But instead, Avram saved them, and as a result, they owed a debt of gratitude, from the notion of Hakar Satov, of recognizing the good that somebody else does for you and keeping that, being machzik tova, holding on to that good as a source of indebtedness. And they didn't. They should have treated us well. They should have treated us with gratitude, and they did not. I'd like to talk about a story of gratitude. Now, Rabbi Victor Miller says that Jews are known as Jews, Yehudim, not because we come from Shevet Yehuda, not because we come from the tribe of Judea, but rather because we are always thanking. We're saying brachos, we're thanking God for our food, we're thanking God for many, many things. We say brachos, we say Baruch Hashem, thank God, and our culture demands of us that we recognize the good, Hakar Satov, and we have gratitude for the good. So here's a personal story, not personal to me, but to my family. I learned about it over the years, mainly from my mother, but also from others. So my mother grew up on the Lower East Side of New York. She was one of 10 children. She recalled to me how she had observed a discussion between her parents in 1939, just as trouble was brewing in Eastern Europe with Germany and the Jews. And my grandfather, who was the head of Kolel Chibas Yerushalayim, which was and still is an organization that supports the needy in Israel, had received a letter from his counterpart, who was the president of Kolel Chibas Yerushalayim in Vienna, Austria, a man by the name of Leopold Lederer. Now, Mr. Lederer, I believe his name is Moshe Yehuda. And Mr. Lederer wrote to my grandfather and said that things are getting very bad for the Jews, and unfortunately he feels that his family's safety is at risk, and if he doesn't get a visa to leave for America, they will certainly perish. And in order to get a visa, he would need to have a sponsor, and that sponsor would have to issue an affidavit that says that he takes personal responsibility for this family. So my mother said she recalled her grandparents her parents, my grandparents, discussing this. This is Ben and Pearl Koenigsberg, and my grandmother said to my grandfather. Now, this was a significant financial responsibility, and my grandmother said to my grandfather that we have a large family, and certainly if we were chas v'shalom in trouble, we would want somebody to help us. So my grandfather agreed to issue an affidavit of support. It turns out that he issued hundreds of these during the war until the State Department determined that one man could not possibly support all of the people that he had pledged to do, and they no longer accepted his affidavits. But they did accept the affidavit of the Lederers, and the Lederers came. Here's a picture of the parents and the 11 children. We have copies of telegrams and letters, etc. Anyway, Wednesday night. They came over Wednesday night, Hanukkah, the first night of Hanukkah. As I understand it, they lit candles on the boat. The next day, my grandmother came with flowers for Mrs. Lederer, and Mrs. Lederer, upon receiving the flowers, said that for years she felt like a chased animal, and this is the first time in years that she felt like a lady. And then my grandparents invited the Lederer mishpacha to the Koenigsberg, that was their name, their Koenigsberg home for Shabbos. This was a Friday night meal and Shabbos meal for Shabbos Hanukkah. And the reports were that it was quite Lebedik. You had the Koenigsbergs with their 10 children, and I think my father said that he was there at the time also, perhaps engaged, or no, already married to my mother. And then you had the Lederer family with their children. So there was quite a crowd, more than 20 people. The next year on Shabbos Hanukkah, the Lederers sent flowers to my grandparents as a mark of their appreciation. And they did it every year afterwards until my grandmother passed away. And then my mother started receiving flowers on Shabbos Hanukkah from one of the Lederer children. This is the Jewish trait of Hakar Satov, of being machzik tova, of holding on to that good, of recognizing the good, of expressing our gratitude, and enriching the lives of everybody around us as a result of that. If a people does not have this sense of gratitude, they can't be part of the Jewish nation. Have a good chance.